Welcome to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Schull. I often get questions, and there's one question in particular that I keep getting over and over again. Hong Kong Disneyland has now been open 20 years, and in that time, it never stopped building. It never stopped opening new ride shows and attractions. So the question I get is, why didn't Disney just build everything they built in the last 20 years for opening day? And I'm going to answer that question starting now. But first, let's make a note that Disney Wharf in Sydney Harbor might have been the first park that Disney built in that region, but they didn't. So let's turn our attention now to the one they did build in Hong Kong. I discovered my first trip to Hong Kong that it's not so much a country as a collection of islands. Lantau Island is the island on which Hong Kong Disneyland Resort was built, although the land on which the park was built wasn't land at all. It's all reclaimed seafloor. They filled in a lot of what was Penny Bay, and the park and hotels and resort look out on a splendid view of the South China Sea. I would submit to you that of all the parks, Hong Kong Disneyland really does have the best views because you can look across the South China Sea as I take a morning stroll from my hotel to work in the park, and I could see the city of Hong Kong in the distance and Discovery Bay just off to the side. Once the seafloor was reclaimed, Disney then could turn their attention to building Hong Kong Disney Resort. This would consist of 2 hotels, a community area, a lake, a ferry terminal, which didn't work out that well, but less said about that, the better, and a theme park. The day came when on Lantau Island, all the Disney executives and LegCo came together to turn the first spade of earth, celebrating the fact that groundbreaking had occurred. It would take them several years in order to create this park and resort and hotels, but the results were worth it. I remember hearing all the bad press about it, but the first time I stepped onto the site, I thought to myself, this isn't a bad little park at all. It has the DNA of the classic Disneyland that we know and love, especially the one in Anaheim, California. However, it did have some strikes against it, and we'll start talking about those now. It comes to the point where you start to ask yourself, is it really worth it? Because the lesson learned is if you underinvest in opening, you have to make up the difference after you opened. And the costs only skyrocket afterward. It's much easier to build things right the first time than to come back and, well, patch the holes that you left in the walls. Hong Kong has their own train that goes from, the train station that links to the airport and to Hong Kong proper and Kowloon and points beyond. And once you're there on site, you're in this beautiful tropical forest. This is hard to believe this was all one seafloor, but it is. And it celebrates, it's a masterpiece of landscaping. The day came when the park opened, and it opened with a beautiful fountain celebrating all the classic Disney characters with a little bit of a twist. And it was equally odd seeing the American flag flying over City Hall. But in the context that this was Main Street, USA, that made sense. But there were differences that started to appear soon after the park opened. For example, in the Opera House, there is no Mr. Lincoln, but you can meet and greet with Baymax. And he's celebrated. People like Baymax. It was a showcase for technology, and also it was a great character greeting. It didn't make a lot of sense there on Main Street, USA, but it starts to point to one of the things about this park. It was based in the DNA of Anaheim, but it had to soon conform to the local tastes of the market that they were in. If you go there, you'll see a lot of things that you'd recognize and say, oh, I know that, like the Licky Tikis. Whether you're in California or in Florida, you know the Licky Tikis. And if you know them, you can love them here in Hong Kong Disneyland. There is a Tomorrowland, but it's built on a very different premise. The idea when it opened was it was a spaceport. Now, a spaceport without a lot of rocket ships or satellites or flying saucers, but it did have aliens. and the aliens would greet you as you took the round trip train trip all around this magic kingdom. They were a lot of fun. They were mounted there on the top of the Buzz Lightyear building, which made sense, but that would soon change. During my decades as a Disney Imagineer, I developed a number of design theories. One of them I call the off-Broadway theory. What I mean by that is when a park is far away from Burbank, California, which is corporate headquarters for the Disney company, they have a de facto permission to try things that a closer park could not. For example, Nightmare Before Christmas has never been at the Magic Kingdom in their Haunted Mansion because honestly, so many people come for a once-in-a-lifetime trip. They come for the classics. And as good as Nightmare is, if it replaced even temporarily the Haunted Mansion there in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, there'd be a riot. Taking this further, in the case of Hong Kong Disneyland, its early years, it was, well, shall we say, financially troubled. And so as a result, the managers there in Hong Kong tried things. And some of them were really unique. There was a pirate takeover of all of Adventureland. They built a temporary facility for their version of Halloween. I can't imagine another Disney park anywhere having fog on the ground in Adventureland and bloody zombies, but you had them there in Hong Kong. Halloween also found a temporary home as a marketing tool for Tomorrowland. It's not something you'd really think about, but the kit of parts was already there in the mountain and the ride, so they just repurposed them in order to bring in Ghost Galaxy. This actually worked. It was popular, it put Disneyland on the map, and it became so popular it found its way, at least on a temporary basis, to Anaheim, California's version of Tomorrowland and their Space Mountain, which confirms that there really are no hard and fast rules for how you talk about Hong Kong Disneyland. You can get away with things in Hong Kong that you can't get away with in any other park. For example, Space Mountain became Hyperspace Mountain. Again, a temporary overlay, but a lot of effort was put into it. And I gotta say that it's really nice. It became part of the Tomorrowland takeover by Star Wars. And for a temporary overlay, it just seems to be pretty darn permanent. Star Wars X-Wing fighters don't come cheap. When Hong Kong Disneyland opened, it had some early expansions, like with the It's a Small World. But nothing major occurred. They stayed within the train berm other than Small World. But soon, the realization dawned that they needed to do something big, something significant, something that would change the park. And so they looked at it. They looked at the areas and they found, well, we can see in this drawing, where the red circles are were the areas where the park would soon to be expanding into. The first area was called internally Chili Pepper. And that's because it hugged the train berm. It hugged the train line and they didn't go beyond it. Regardless of what was going to come, it cost money. And as I said, it was called Chili Pepper. Maybe it's because of chili sauce being so predominant in China. I do not know. But regardless, I found myself on a plane because the first thing in Chili Pepper was going to be a brand new Toy Story line, especially for Hong Kong. And this work began even before the one in Paris finished. Work also began on Moana Theater. And the presence of Moana continues with an overlay of an existing restaurant in Adventureland themed on Moana. I have another design lesson to share, which is the law of unintended consequences. An example of that is Disneyland in Anaheim and Hong Kong Disneyland share the same small footprint. And that means Hong Kong, like Anaheim, has to be very clever in how they spend their land capital. In the case of Hong Kong Disneyland, they had a bit of land up in Fantasyland, which was getting over to trees and landscaping, but they needed an attraction. And so what they did was they built a walk-through version of Storybook Land canal boats that they call Fairy Tale Forest. Once you're inside, you get to see miniatures based on the environments of the recent classic Disney films. You can see characters, you can hear the music, there's places to sit in the shade. And at the end of your day, you go home and you look at the tally list of what you saw at Hong Kong and you realize oh, that counts against your total. And as a result, you go, this is a good place. I got value for the time and the money that I spent. Honestly, sometimes it's better for a designer to be constrained by limits as opposed to saying, oh, here's all the land you could possibly imagine, because then you can waste it. When you're constrained, you're forced to make good, smart decisions. And Hong Kong is a great example of that. One of the projects corrected an issue that happened from the very beginning. The castle in Hong Kong was based on the Anaheim Castle, but Anaheim did not have a mountain range behind it. So the Hong Kong castle was dwarfed, or seemingly dwarfed. The solution was to create their own castle, one just designed for Hong Kong Disneyland. The castle was designed uniquely for Hong Kong, and it was built in the middle of an operating park, which meant it was expensive, which brings us back to this question. The cost to fix something after you open are a lot greater than when you started, but you want to get to the point of being in balance. And so whether it's Hong Kong's Disneyland's version of Toy Story Land that had to be adapted for the local weather of Hong Kong, or with the addition of a shop and a toilet and a meet and greet that made it not an off-the-shelf lift, but something that was unique. But Hong Kong got some new things, unique things that we haven't seen anywhere else, such as Grizzly Peak, which is a new West, not Old West version of Frontierland. Not really based upon a movie or real life. It's just kind of a movie set version of what a fun Frontierland might look like. And it has a unique ride, the Grizzly Mountain Train, or whatever it's called. I always forget. It's Grizzly something. But it's a lot of fun. It's a family coaster right in the middle of the land, and you get to walk around it, which gives you a lot of eye candy. You don't have to ride it to like it. And often it's important because in a climate with a culture that people aren't really sure what they're about to get on, you need to show them what it is before that you can entice them to ride it. Mystic Manor is all indoor, but it doesn't seem to matter. And the same with Iron Man, the Iron Man experience, which there the idea was to take part of Tomorrowland and suddenly make it Stark Expo. Take a little bit of land that lay beyond the train track and put in a simulator and base the story of the simulator around Iron Man, the Tony Stark version. There was a shop, there was a meet and greet, there was area development, and there was a really big simulator. And it was very attractive. It was fun. But it meant some things had to go away, like the Utopia, which was an all-electric version with the sound chip that made you believe you were driving a gas engine. The master plan showed Marvel Tower in the future as part of Stark Expo, which is their version of Avengers Campus, which was paid for on the installment plan. Because once you had the Iron Man experience and then you added to that the Ant-Man experience, you were left with the Avengers or Marvel Tower. All of it themed around Stark Expo, which again is their version of Adventures Campus, which meant they have the bragging rights in Hong Kong of something that is unique. Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle is one of the longer names in the Disney ride catalog, and it replaced one of the shorter names, which was Buzz Lightyear, which was in and open with Tomorrowland there in Hong Kong Disneyland. But Buzz Lightyear had one thing against it. It wasn't next to the Iron Man experience, which was the opening salvo of Hong Kong Disneyland's Stark Expo, which was the name they gave their version of Avengers Campus. When Iron Man opened, it had a shop, it had a meet and greet, and it had the ride. But it was right next door to Buzz Lightyear. And so very quickly they grasped Buzz Lightyear, closing it, and made it Ant-Man. Not to say that Ant-Man is a ride you're going to go to Hong Kong to specifically ride, but again, it has high capacity and satisfying. It's within the template of what you would expect a Marvel land to be. And it's a good example where Hong Kong honestly didn't have the luxury of space to leave the Buzz Lightyear ride there. They really needed to take it because within the context of Tomorrowland, it was more valuable to seize that space to be part of their Marvel experience than to leave it as a little corner of a Pixar experience. Oh, and by the way, they already had Toy Story Land right across the park. Now let's get back to the master plan released by Disney. The Marvel attraction was penciled in to open in 2023, but as I look at my calendar, that date was going to be missed. But they did close Autopia. Autopia, the little electric car ride with a sound chip that made it sound like you were driving a gas engine, never had that much appeal, which makes sense because in this culture, not everyone drives. Cars are expensive. Cars are hard to maintain. You have to find a place for your car to be parked, and honestly, there isn't anywhere really to drive it. And a lot of things were thought about for what this could be. Currently, it's proposed to be this, well, we don't really know what the name is, but it's going to be an Avengers ride. Getting back to this, all of these changes have one thing in common. Because they weren't done for opening day or soon after, they cost a lot of money. In the future, there's not much land left. There is one piece, and after that, the park is finished. But there is one more thing, and that is a lesson learned. You can pay me now, or you can pay me later, but you need to pay me. In the case of Hong Kong, LegCo has announced that the rights for the second gate have now lapsed, and the rights would not be extended, which means the land set aside for a second gate in Hong Kong will not happen. So DCA was a compliment to Disneyland and Anaheim, but Hong Kong is not going to have that. Today, Hong Kong Disneyland is one of the very best of any of the Disney theme parks you could hope to visit. It started off based upon the template of Anaheim's original Disneyland, but in the 2 decades since it opened, it's become its own thing, its own creature. And today it boasts a number of attractions that are unique and special and definitely worthy of the e-ticket designation. For example, we've yet to see anything that tops Mystic Manor stateside, and we may never. Hong Kong Disneyland to me is the most interesting of any of the castle parks because they'll build things and they don't hesitate to take them out, no matter how good they are. I've always had a great time whenever I've gone to this park, and I know you will too. And that brings this episode of Disney Journey to a close. I'm already busy working on the next episode and the one after that, so I invite you to join me. Be sure to hit the like, share, hype, and bell notification buttons. And consider becoming a member of the channel, just like these great folks. Their support keeps me going, and I've got a lot to share. Oh, and I forgot to mention that now I've started sending all channel members a bonus episode. So if you want to see additional material, be sure to consider joining. Sign up today. Your membership gets you privileges. So for now, it's goodbye from Lost Canyon.